In the endless void of outer space, we find two entities, dear listener. Both of them have orange eyes without pupils and no other discerning features. They begin to chat, and each of them have their own stylized word balloon to denote which of them is speaking. The first to speak uses an orange word balloon, its outline red, shifting into yellow. The second's balloons are blue, its outline shifting from dark blue to light blue. Back on the old cross-gen message boards, we referred to these two as the creator and the mentor, respectively. The creator starts by complaining about how the universe is growing colder. It seeks an answer to this problem, and so it invites this other being to offer solutions. The mentor comments on how strange this is. It isn't like you to be so troubled. It wasn't always like this, the creator moans. Things used to be so exciting, so complex back in the beginning. But now things have gotten boring, the worlds grow colder, and glorious fields of battle are now still and barren. The problem isn't just a lack in warriors, though. The creator recognizes that the very energies of everything are fading. This shouldn't be happening. It is dying, and the first do nothing to stop it. The first don't understand their place in the universe, the mentor says. They don't know what role they play. True, they need to be motivated. They need to get things going again, but revealing their hand, meaning the creator's hand, would change the very nature of them. So why start with them? The mentor asks. There are many worlds open to its influence, populated by many people. Just walk among them. Add a small mark of passage to one on each world, add your sigil to them, and open them to the power. Why only one? The creator asks. The number doesn't matter, the mentor counters, just offering a suggestion. The smaller the number, the greater the burden on each sigil bearer. If there were many of them, they would allow someone else to do the work. As with the first, the creator verbally nods. Still, you can tell that it's hesitant to agree. Come, the mentor says. Drifting between the two sets of eyes is a planet. It's very Earth-like, with large continents of brown and green, vast blue oceans, and swirling, whipping clouds. As we turn the page, the planet is split in half, framing a large panel in the center. Within that panel, we see a gleaming metal ship, hovering over the tossing seas. Gray-skinned dolphin folk leap from the water next to it, while bat-winged beings flap in the air. A large gray stone castle sits on a large hill that is overlooking the seaside. The creator recognizes this world. Ah, this was its first world. It's changed, though. Look at how it has grown. It has indeed. The mentor understands that new races of men have been created, although they are treated as less than men. Even with that, though, there has been little real battle of late, the creator says. Their mock combat needs to be turned back into war, their old hatreds ignited again. A task easily done if you follow your plan, the mentor sneakily says. But the creator hesitates. What should it tell them, these sigil bearers? Nothing, the mentor answers. Let their actions dictate the flare of the sigil. They will re-energize their warriors and bring them back to the fight. As they fight, they'll create more conflict. The creator stops its fellow. You mean cross-generation? Yes. Conflict from conflict. Energy from energy. Why, you could start a whole new chain of creation to stoke the cooling fires of the whole. You can almost hear the smile in the creator's words. I can feel it growing warmer already. My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown, episode 18.1, Scion. High fantasy meets high tech. This conversation appeared in the first issue of CrossGen's 4 launch titles: The Magical Mystic, The Science Fiction Sigil, The Floating Islands of Meridian, and here in the technologically advanced, yet somehow still medieval, world of Scion. The only real difference between these is during the bit where the creator and the mentor look at the specific planet, which changes from book to book. So there's a lot of unknown here, as CrossGen at the time was a brand new comic book universe. Who are these two figures? We don't really know. There are context clues in the conversation that we can draw from, though. The figure that I refer to as the creator seems to claim ownership of, well, existence, I guess. They claim to have created this world, they claim to have been here since the beginning, and the mentor character specifically refers to things as yours, giving its companion ownership over them. Whatever this being is, it created the first, whatever those are. It created a variety of worlds and the peoples on them, and now it has been talked into creating these sigil bearers. Calling this being the creator was a bit of a controversy at the time of publication, though. While the mentor does feel like a secondary character to me in this conversation, they certainly are an active part of it. The mentor identifies the problem with the lack of energies, the mentor dismisses the first as a possible solution, the mentor suggests a plan to fix this problem, and the mentor is the one who even tricks this other being into thinking that it is their idea. The creator even outright asks them, "What do I tell these people?" So while they are claiming and are given dominion over these planets, this mentor figure almost reads like an equal. The power dynamic in this conversation is constantly shifting. These two beings are clearly used to interacting with each other, and the creator values the mentor's opinions. And that means calling one of them specifically the creator and the other specifically just a mentor might not be 100% accurate. Basic Ace Science nerd Ben doesn't like the proposed solution here. I don't know much about the laws of energy or thermodynamics, but I do understand the basic idea that energy cannot be created or destroyed, merely transformed from one state to another. So solar energy can be absorbed by plants, which can then be eaten by animals and converted back into energy, which can then be eaten by other animals to be converted into energy again, and then they die and rot and act as an energy force for insects, molds, and other plants. If the energies of the universe are dying, something needs to be absorbing or draining them. You can't just do stuff to create new energies, because by doing stuff, you're actually just redirecting existing energies. So this proposed idea, that of cross-generation, doesn't really make sense, although it is a cute way of referencing the company name. If this was an episode of CinemaSins, we would roll credits. But this scene does get the basic point across. Gods or godlike beings know that the universe is growing stagnant, and in order to shake things up, one of them is going to mark an individual on this world with a sign of power, the sigil, which will then foment conflict. Do this on enough worlds, and maybe things will start to change for the better. I can't help but point out, though, that there is a lot of subtext here as well. The broad strokes basic concepts of the CrossGen universe were hashed out by founders Mark Alessi and his cousin Gina Villa, but they could easily be talking about the American comic book industry as a whole, instead of this fictional comic book universe. While Marvel, DC, and Image have managed to keep the comic book industry alive, it is no small fact that the industry has been constantly shrinking since roughly the 1970s. Rather than trying to innovate and do new things, though, the companies just keep doing the exact same kind of thing. Pump out superhero books, restart their universes over and over so that they can tell the same basic kinds of stories, as exemplified by Marvel's then-new Ultimate Universe, which was a modernized retelling of some of their most popular concepts. Just as these two beings are trying to save their universe, Alessi and Villa are trying to re-energize the comic industry. They will do so by creating new characters marked with a symbol, CrossGen's main branding symbol, that of the red and yellow sigil. Hopefully, these individuals will stir things up, and maybe save everything. So let's meet one of them. Scion Issue 1 was written by Ron Mars, penciled by Jim Chung, inked by Don Hilsman II, colored by Cesar Rodriguez, and it was lettered by Dave Lanphier. On the world of Avalon, it is a glorious day. Ethan, the youngest son of the ruling Heron dynasty, has got it all going on. He's just turned 21, so he's now considered a man, he's handsome, and his tournament opponent lies on the ground at his feet. Two beautiful women throw flower petals into the air, joining a raid of celebratory confetti. Ethan lifts his sword into the air, his shoulder-length blonde hair blowing in the wind. He smiles wide as the crowd chants his name. Ethan! 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 He pumps his other fist into the air, but he starts when a drop of rain hits it. The chanting fades quickly as more and more rain falls from the sky, turning the day gray and disappointing. Ethan stands alone in the rain. Which is when Ethan's eyes snap open, because he's just had a bucket of water splashed over his sleeping body. Only a single voice calls his name in reality, and the owner of that voice grabs Ethan by his sleeve shirt and pulls him up. Standing over Ethan's bed are two other men, his older brother Kai and their eldest brother Artur, who holds an empty bucket. "Time to get up, Ethan," they say. "It's the day that you become a man. Can't have you wasting it all day in bed." Still rattled from his dream, Ethan rises and Kai wishes him a heartfelt happy birthday. Artur pats him on the shoulder. "Nervous about your first tournament?" "No," Ethan replies, "not at all." Artur smiles warmly. "You're not a very good liar." Anyway, the barges will depart for the tournament aisle soon, and Ethan has a lot to do before then. Best get to it. The armorsmith is expecting him any moment now. The brothers exit Ethan's room, which is the classic stone and wood of a European castle. But let's pause there. We've just been introduced to our lead character, Ethan, as well as our main setting. We now know that this world is vaguely medieval, although we haven't really gotten much exploration of the idea that there is advanced technology here yet. We did see some in our opening scene, but so far, this scene with Ethan and his brothers could have happened on Earth at some point in its history, for all we know. We clearly start to meet Ethan's family as well, and it feels very natural. Even at 21, Ethan is still the youngest brother, and his older brothers let him know it with this prank. But it is all done with love, as they're super affectionate with Ethan. Kai, by the way, has blonde hair like Ethan, but it is worn back in a ponytail, while Artur has brown hair and a big mustache. Artur just radiates good dad energy, but the whole scene is very heartwarming. It's clear that there is a lot of love in this family, and given our opening dream sequence, that means bad news for somebody. Ethan's dream is just that, a dream. He is not clairvoyant, he is not looking at the future here. But author Ron Mars is foreshadowing that something is going to go wrong on Ethan's big day. It's just a question of what. So Ethan's brothers leave his room and they pass by a short form. Kai gently rustles this person's hair and they tell him to see to Ethan. This is Skink. Skink is doubled over and his head rises to just around Ethan's waist. His skin is a yellowish green, his ears are pointed, and he only has 4 fingers on each hand. Diamond-shaped black tattoos frame Skink's golden eyes, while 2 thin strips of hair run on either side of his head. A small golden nose ring is worn through his nostril. We will eventually be told that Skink is a member of the lesser races. He offers Ethan an apology for his brother's behavior and a towel. Ethan easily accepts both from his old friend. "It was just a joke, Skink. He's fine." Skink moves to what appears to be a tapestry that's hanging on the wall, and he presses a large red dial that is set into the wall next to it. The tapestry is revealed to be a hologram, and it disappears, revealing Ethan's wardrobe. "The blue tunic?" Skink asks. He then wishes Ethan a happy birthday as well, adding that it is normal to be nervous on your first tournament. Your mother is quite worried, actually. Once dressed, Ethan and Skink continue this conversation in the hallway. She's his mom. Of course she's worried. Ethan is now dressed for the day in what is basically going to be his main costume for a while. Leather boots top out just below his knees. He wears a pair of white pants, a thick belt which bisects a blue tunic. The symbol of the House of Heron, which is a right-facing heron with its wing splayed behind it, rests upon the center of his chest. White lines frame an orange field which runs beneath it to the bottom of the tunic, which ends at his knees. The orange area is filled with these squiggly lines, too, just as decoration. Under the top portion of the tunic is a mail shirt, short-sleeved, and gray metal gauntlets cover Ethan's forearms. Honestly, it's a good look. Skink says that Ethan's mother has good reason to worry. His father has something important to tell him about the tournament, but Skink is then cut off by Ethan, who has noticed a new serving girl as they join the main hallway of the castle. Skink sighs. Ethan, this is important, please. But Ethan brushes off the concern. You're beginning to sound like Mother, Skink. They approach a glowing elevator and Ethan commands it to open. They step inside, and he then tells it to take them to the sub-basement forge. Ethan then reassures Skink that he'll be fine. He's been training, Skink is going to be his second, he's gonna be fine, he isn't nervous. Much. Skink looks up at him. Maybe you should be. That actually throws Ethan. What do you mean by that? But then the elevator stops, opening into the hot, oppressive air of the forge. Steam and smoke float around the chamber. The smith looks up, hairy and shirtless, save for his leather apron and pants. A welder's mask hangs off the back of his neck. 2 mechanical lenses, which I hope are worn over his eyes, and he's got a pretty sweet-looking mustache. Covered in grime and sweat, the smith smiles at Ethan. Why, he remembers when Ethan was knee-high to Skink, and he had to shoo him out of the forge constantly. Oh, look how you've grown. Slightly embarrassed by this, Ethan asks after his things, and the smith presents them. The first is a display case, which Ethan opens, and he then holds up the contents. Inside of it is a beautiful sword. The guard is shaped to look like the curved wings of a heron. See a theme here? And the blade is polished to a reflective sheen. Ethan is impressed by the work, and he should be. The smith based the design on that of Ethan's ancestor, Edvin, one of the men for whom the tournament is held. Since Ethan was born on the anniversary of the tournament day, the smith thought that it was only fitting. He then hands Ethan some golden gauntlets to replace his gray ones. Just depress the stud here, and he points, for your shield, and on the other one, he points again, for your armor. Ethan puts both of them on, and then a man asks if Ethan has seen his son. When Ethan turns, he finds his father, King Dane, who is a portly, middle-aged man with curly brown hair that is graying at the temples. They hug, and the king praises the smith's abilities. Then he turns and looks disapprovingly at Skink. Hopefully this blade is lucky, too, since Ethan insists on using him as his second. It just isn't done, Ethan. But Ethan defends his choice of Skink. He has protected Ethan his whole life. He'll take care of him in the arena, too. So let's hit pause again. Mars is doing some fairly effortless character work here, but it is critical to our understanding of Ethan. So we're meeting Ethan's family, but not just his blood family. Skink is going to end up being Ethan's sidekick throughout this series, and we can see that there is a bond here that goes beyond the norm for this society. While Artor and Kai did acknowledge Skink, their words and actions were also fairly dismissive of him. If Skink really has been with Ethan since he was a child, like the smith suggests, then you would think that everyone would be used to him, right? He would be like an adopted part of the family, yeah? And Skink would have to be 20 plus years old if he's watching over Ethan all of the time. But Kai's rustling of Skink's hair feels more like something you would do to a child, not a grown adult, even as a servant. And clearly King Dane doesn't approve of Skink acting as Ethan's second in the tournament. This highlights how much Skink means to Ethan, but it also shows how kind-hearted Ethan is. Even amongst his family, Ethan values Skink more than the others do, which sets him apart. Ethan also notices the new serving girl in the hall, showing that he has a keen eye and that he likes the ladies. I am a bit surprised that at age 21, Ethan doesn't have some kind of political royal marriage thing lined up yet. I actually don't think that any of the Heron kids have a family outside of their parents. That's something that I'm going to have to keep an eye out for as I reread this book. I'm vaguely remembering maybe Artor had a wife, but I'm not 100% on that. We'll get there, but yeah. I also think it's interesting that a medieval society acknowledges adulthood as beginning at 21, given that European medieval societies would generally marry off their kids ASAP or, appoint 10-year-olds as kings or stuff like that. Just very clearly, Avalon's a little bit more advanced socially than we would expect for this kind of setting as well. Speaking of advanced, we finally got our first look at advanced technology in this story, meaning Ethan's wardrobe and the elevator, and some of the tech that the smith has in his forge. I won't lie, the advanced technology doesn't play a huge role in the book this early in the series, but it will play a big role in our upcoming conflict. Mars and Chung are subtly introducing the idea that Avalon has technology with things that we're used to, and it'll only get weirder and more advanced from here. Queen Mariella, who provided the blonde hair gene that Ethan and Kai inherited, enters the room with Princess Elena, the only Heron daughter. The queen tells her husband that Ethan is a man now and responsible for his own decisions. She doesn't approve of him being in the tournament at all, personally. Has Dane even told Ethan the news yet? The ladies then give Ethan a kiss on the cheek each, wishing him a happy birthday. King Dane defends the tradition that is the tournament. It's the only thing that keeps the peace between them, the Heron dynasty and the Raven dynasty to the east. They have fought in mock combat for centuries, Mariella, and Avalon hasn't seen warfare since that began. Plus, their family has always taken part in it. It's tradition, it's expected, and it's what's honorable. He then turns to Ethan. He's proud to see his son grown into a man who is willing to carry on their family traditions. But in this case, Mariella might be right. The tournament draw puts Ethan against Prince Braun. He's fought and beaten Ethan's brothers before. They all know his reputation. No one would question if Ethan chose not to participate. Hint, hint. Ethan smiles like only the ignorant can. He isn't afraid of Braun. The smith then hands him a nice black scabbard for his sword. Ethan has a strong arm and strong steel. So long as he keeps his head about him, he'll keep his head about him. Buckling on the scabbard, Ethan then tells his family not to worry. He needs to do this. Skink adds that he'll be watching over the boy. Mariella looks at him, assuring him that he'll be held to that promise. King Dane then shoos everyone along. The barges leave soon, and they all need to finish their preparations. Before they can all separate, Elena pulls off a light blue scarf from around her neck. She hands it to Ethan, wishing him good luck in his fight. I know that I have only ever seen a woman give a combatant a gift cloth when that girl is attracted to the fighter, which clearly isn't the case here, but still, I was amazingly uneasy with this moment during my reread. I don't honestly think that I gave it a second thought back when CrossGen was publishing these books originally, but yeah, for whatever reason, this kind of creeped me out a bit. Maybe it's partially because Elena feels like the least well-developed cast member so far. Admittedly, we've only just met King Dane and Queen Mariella, but we can see that they're of two minds about the tournament right off the bat. They do agree that maybe Ethan shouldn't participate, though. They aren't one unit, they are their own individual people, and that is nice to see. Right now, Elena just appears to be Mariella's shadow, but given how much work Mars is doing with this family in such limited space, I still think that he's doing a good job overall. We also get our first hint as to Ethan's first confrontation with the Raven Prince Braun. We haven't seen this guy yet, except on the cover, but we already know that he beat Artor and Kai in combat, and the Heron parents clearly don't want Ethan going against him. This guy must be a force to be reckoned with, and Mars is putting the fear of him into us without even introducing him. That's solid writing, folks! This scene also continues to highlight the difference between Ethan and his family. Despite never participating in the tournament before, Ethan is confident, perhaps overconfident, in his skills, while his family clearly has some reservations. Ethan also sees participation as something he must do, a matter of honor. King Dane even tells him that if he chose not to fight Braun, no one would think less of him, but Ethan argues that he would think less of him. He has got some powerful pride, this young man. enough to put him into combat against a stronger, more experienced foe. Ethan might be the fourth child of the Herons, but he is certainly not like the rest of his family. Nor does he feel like a cartoonishly rebellious figure, though. Ethan feels, to me, like a normal person. And that's one of the things that I love most about this comic. Despite taking place on an alien world with alien technology and a throwback-style setting, the characters don't necessarily feel like characters. They feel like people. They are grounded and they're concerned for one another, willing to argue and disagree, but still ultimately bonded by love for one another. That's great, and I love that stuff. Later that day, we have moved to the tunnel entrance of the tournament ground. Ethan has Elena's scarf tied around his right bicep, and his sword is secured against his leg. Skink tells him to calm down. His turn will come soon enough. But Ethan is jittery. Although, and this is my only real artistic complaint about this issue, Ethan certainly doesn't look it. Penciler Jim Chung does have Ethan staring down the hallway. It's clearly where his focus is at, but he looks focused, not nervous. But he clearly is nervous because the next thing that he says is that he is nervous, but he's not scared. He definitely is not scared. The waiting is what's getting to him. It's like he can feel that something is about to happen. Suddenly, the last combatant, a black man, is rushed back down the tunnel. His second shouts for a medic. Figures cloaked in purple and wearing ominous metal masks crowd in, surrounding the man. There is a flash of light, a cry of pain. Ah! And the man's wounded arm is completely restored, as if nothing had ever happened to him. Since this held all of his attention, Ethan doesn't notice the lesser race member who walks up behind him. This figure looks drastically different from Skink. They look vaguely draconian, with a short spike jutting up into the air from its snout. This figure's eyes also glow orange. It touches Ethan's arm, where Elena's scarf is, and a mysterious glow emanates from there. It wishes Ethan good luck. And then it drops back into the shadows of the tunnel. Skink suddenly grabs Ethan's hand and pulls him forward. Come on, it's time for your fight, Ethan. He doesn't even get a chance to look at the mysterious figure again. Stepping onto the tournament grounds, we're treated to a delicious 2-page spread. Hundreds of people are seated in the stands of the arena. Large spotlights sweep the night sky as headshots of Ethan and Braun are projected into the air. Massive screens are set at regular intervals around the stadium, giving everyone a chance to see the fight. Drone cameras sweep around the combatants, recording everything. A thin, yellow-skinned and purple-spotted member of the lesser races sits in a hovering pod nearby. All combatants will step to the circle, it says. As Ethan gawks, overwhelmed, it looks to him. Combatant? Not 10 feet away stands Prince Braun. The Prince of the Ravens is that hard to pin down because of the artwork age, meaning that he could be a really rough-looking 21 or a very in-shape 39. He is muscular, though, with a hard, square jawline, a thin goatee, and curly black hair that is swept back from his face. He is dressed in blue-black leather, although it is trimmed along some areas with red. A large red clasp is worn over his right breast, which will activate his own defenses. He just stares at Ethan from his side of the tournament grounds. Skink bumps into Ethan. Pay attention! Ethan jolts and moves into the combat circle. The Arbiter then explains the basic rules. Combat will be to first blood or a yielding. Physicians can enter the circle if they so choose, or if they're summoned. All decisions made by the Arbiter are final. Now, if the combatants are ready to begin, both men agree that they're ready. Then they may initiate their armor. Ethan presses the stud on his gauntlet, while Braun presses on his clasp. Glowing transparent armor suddenly manifests on both of them, detailed and ornate. Ethan's armor is a clear yellow, while Braun's is a vibrant red. Both of them sport wings as well, although I think that they're mostly ornamental. Now they may initiate their blades? The pair do that as well, causing their swords to glow either yellow or red. Braun mutters under his breath, Your brothers were nothing. The Arbiter raises a hand.
And fight!
With a powerful shout, "Ugh!" Braun charges in, slamming his sword into Ethan's own. Ethan dodges a wide stab and parries, but his blade doesn't find flesh. Braun activates his shield and then body checks Ethan with it. The young man steps back, causing Braun's next swing to go wide. While Braun is open, Ethan stabs in and manages to land a glancing hit on Braun's left hand, the energy armor shattering, but there is no blood. Enraged, Braun swings his sword like a baseball bat, hammering at Ethan's shield over and over again. As he does, the camera zooms in on Ethan's arm, where we can see a golden glow through Elena's scarf. That glow suddenly pushes through Ethan's arm and into his blade. He can feel something happening, although he doesn't know what it is. Still caught up in the fight, though, Ethan slashes his sword upward, and it shatters Braun's sword, pushing through his defenses and slicing through his face. Braun falls to his knees, cradling his wound, and Ethan is left reeling. What just happened? Skink looks at him and tells him that he won. Medics rush to Braun's side to treat him as Ethan smiles. He did it. He won. He lifts his sword up, just like at the start of this issue. He won! One of the medics turns to the Arbiter. This wound cannot fully be healed, it reports. It will leave a scar. The joy drains from Ethan's face in an instant. No, that can't be. The Arbiter glares at him.
Any weapon that would leave an unhealable scar is illegal. In using one, Ethan has violated the tournament rules and its spirit. As such, Braun is the victor, and Ethan is censured.
But there isn't anything special about his sword, Ethan protests. Skink points at his arm instead, and the strange glow coming from his bicep. Maybe this has something to do with what happened? Ethan pulls off the scarf, revealing a red and yellow mark where previously there was none. Ethan is baffled and confused by this. What is it? The tournament is perhaps the vaguest portion of this issue, and I'll admit that I'm not really sure how it works institutionally. Like, this is Ethan's first tournament, but somehow he has managed to land Braun as his opponent? Don't you need to fight your way through brackets in a tournament? Is this really just luck of the draw? And how does the healing process work here? Even with increased healing speed, cuts should still leave a scar. That's just how healing works. Obviously, the implication here is that the dynasties have technology that can heal so perfectly that even scars are not left behind. And Mars even shows us the previous combatant being healed in order to demonstrate this. But honestly, we barely get to see that healing. No one explains that scars are even healed, and it's just always bugged me that everyone is about to freak out about Braun's scar when it's just a scar. And sure, it is also a wounded eye, and it is an insult and a slight to Braun's honor, but I still can't help but think that you went into combat, dude. You were battering at Ethan like a man trying to chop a tree. You can't tell me that you wouldn't have wounded him if you had the chance. Maybe if in the previous scene, the wounded man had run to Ethan like he was clinging to his body, shouting for a medic, and then the medics healed him right before Ethan and us as the audience, and then Ethan could even have been amazed, saying something like, "There isn't even a scar left." And one of the medics could boast about their skills, turning to Ethan and being like, "You best fight well, Prince, else you'll get to experience this process firsthand," or something like that, just to solidify all of these concepts in the reader's minds. I also don't like that I'm not quite sure what Ethan's sigil does here. We're told that the fighters ignite their swords and then they begin to glow, so I'm assuming that they're either heated or sheathed in energy which matches the frequency of the energy armor that they're wearing. That way, the opponents can only hit armor. But that clearly can't be the intent, as the Arbiter says that the fight is to first blood. So clearly, somebody's meant to get cut here. So what's the deal then with the ignited blades idea? And what did the sigil do to Ethan's blade? How did it make a cut unhealable to magical sci-fi technology bullshit? Obviously, we're going to be exploring some of these ideas moving forward, specifically how the sigil works and what Ethan can do with it, but I won't lie, what happens here really does throw me at the end. We also get to see the foreshadowing from the beginning of this issue brought around full circle, as Ethan wins his fight, but ultimately loses the day. This issue just flew by. And Mars writes the whole book so smoothly that honestly, it was kind of hard for me to find good places to stop in order to do the breakdowns. Everything just flows so well, and our cast is so small, and there's just nowhere else to jump to in the narrative or nothing else to look in on. And I just love how economical it feels. There's no muss here, no fuss, just good comics. It does end so quickly that I am left wanting more now. And that is a definite downside to the story arc written style. I feel like we just got going, and already we're stopping. Like, give me next month already, I want another comic book. Thankfully, CrossGen knew that as their series went on and became more convoluted, it would be increasingly difficult for new readers to pick up their books. Any long-running series is going to have this problem, and CrossGen's solution was a Story Thus Far page, located inside of the cover when you opened up the comic. These pages would recap the series thus far up to the issue that you were holding. They also had headshots of the main cast, so if you were a new reader picking up, let's say, issue 100, and maybe you had never even heard of any of these comics, in theory, you could read this page and know enough of the basics to be fine. CrossGen was not the first company to do this, as Marvel tried something similar in the late 90s, but Marvel ended up cutting that feature after, I want to say, a year or so. They also introduced a similarly designed recap page in the early 2000s, I think before CrossGen was around, but I do not know that for a fact, and they have had something similar ever since. Not that we need a recap page yet, I just wanted you to know that CrossGen was looking out for you. Our second issue opens with Prince Braun lunging for Ethan's neck. A thick line of scar tissue runs from his upper lip through his right eye, almost reaching his hairline. The angry wound is a dark scarlet, still wet with blood, as are Braun's hands as they tighten around Ethan's neck. "Look what you did to me!" Ethan tries to explain that it was an accident, but Braun doesn't care to listen. He'll have his due. But suddenly a knife presses into his throat, stopping him. Prince Kai calmly tells Braun to let go of his brother, or he'll be wearing more of his own blood. A blade from Prince Artor joins Kai's, and Braun releases the boy. The camera then pulls back, revealing the concerned faces of both the Heron and Raven dynasties. As Queen Mariella rushes to her youngest son, Artor slices through the nearest camera. She asks Ethan if he's okay, he says that he is, and then King Dane steps forward. Ethan is a man now, and responsible for his actions, so he better explain them now. Ethan tries, claiming that he fought Braun fairly. He honestly doesn't know what happened. He pulls up his short sleeve, displaying the sigil for all to see. Whatever happened must be tied in with this thing, although how or why he doesn't know. King Dane is puzzled. It just appeared? Maybe if you'd chosen a proper second, he says, looking at Skink, this wouldn't have happened. The family discussion is cut short as the king of the Raven dynasty approaches, claiming Heron treachery. Like his son, the king is dressed in black leather with red accents. He has a red cape pinned to his shoulders by folded silver wings. His aged face is severe, with no hair atop his head. He does have 2 small tufts of black hair on either side of his chin, though. He, and his nation, are insulted by this injury, and even more insulted by Ethan blaming it on some magical mark. If this isn't addressed properly, the Raven dynasty may have to take their satisfaction on the battlefield. The 2 kings begin to posture and bicker over a potential war, but Braun cuts them both off. What happened has happened. What matters now is what happens next. And he demands that Ethan be their prisoner for 1 year until the next tournament. King Dane refuses this demand. He's heard stories of the Ravens' hospitality. Then shall we have war? The Raven King asks, his side of this conflict bristling. The herons do the same, preparing for the fight, until Ethan steps forward. No, he'll do it. His family immediately protests this, but Ethan holds firm. He did this, even if he doesn't know how he did it. And if he can fix this with no further bloodshed on either side, then he has to do it. It's the only responsible thing to do. Skink, at Ethan's side, tells him that he must go with him, but Ethan won't ask that of him. He does ask Skink to bring him his sword, though. While he does, Ethan says his goodbyes to his mother, his sister, and his brothers. King Dane is last, hugging him tightly. This is the right thing to do, Father. Dane sighs. I know it is, but it's still a bitter pill to swallow. He tells Ethan that he loves him, and then Skink returns. As Ethan turns to face the ravens, Skink asks once again if he can go with him. Ethan replies that he won't say no if Skink is adamant about going, but the decision isn't really his to make. As a medic wipes the blood off of Braun's face, Ethan kneels before him and offers up his sword. He apologizes for the injury and asks if Skink could be allowed to share his punishment. Braun snatches up the weapon. He couldn't care less what that piece of filth does. Then Braun turns, ordering 2 servants to bring him, meaning Ethan. How's that for an opening scene? I love that there's no preamble to this, no setup, just floop and go. If you wanted to take the time to read that story thus far page, sure, you could, and good luck with it, but when the page next to it is an enraged Braun choking Ethan out, why would you bother? I just see that and I want to dive in and get to it, and we do, and I love it. Mars does then take the time to slow things back down, recapping how we got here and demonstrating our cast's reactions. Honestly, you can totally skip that story thus far page. Given how mysteriously the sigil appeared on Ethan and Dane's general mistrust of the lesser races that was established last issue, I like him questioning Ethan's choice of second and whether or not it led to this result. I am a little bit thrown by it because this world clearly has advanced technology, so you would think that the people would be more scientifically minded, right? Like, my first thought would be to investigate the smith who made the sword, as clearly the sword is different from a normal sword. So Ethan got a magical tattoo, whoop-de-floop and do. What I would want to know is who messed with this
No swearing.
fucking blade? Obviously, as an audience, we know, vaguely, where the sigil came from, and we know that it did something. But the cast doesn't know it, which makes the Raven King dismissing it as the cause kinda satisfactory. So, a point to the bad guy. In all fairness, the Raven King doesn't actually come off too badly here. He does seem to be itching for a fight, but I would argue that he's actually putting on a brave front. These 2 families are the 2 major ruling powers of this world, and the Ravens cannot appear politically weak, especially when the heir to the throne was just beaten by the youngest son of the Herons. Yes, he was censured, and yes, Braun won officially, but everyone watching that fight saw Ethan draw first blood. They saw Braun wounded. Politically, this could be a nightmare for the Ravens, as their own people might begin to think them weak. For the king, this moment is less about soothing Braun's hurt ego and his face, and it is more about saving face politically. If the Herons turn over Ethan, it is a sign that they answer to the will of the Ravens, and that puts the Ravens back on top. Obviously, Dane and the rest of the family aren't cool with this idea. Remember, most of them didn't even want Ethan to fight at all, but Ethan readily accepts his punishment. And this still kind of blows me away. Like, Ethan might be 21 years old in the story, but he still feels very young in this. I honestly remembered him being like maybe 16 or 18, so when his brother said that he was 21 last issue, it kind of threw me, I won't lie. And like I said, he does feel young. I can't imagine my greatest enemy, who my family has been feuding with for generations, requesting that I stay with them and knowing that I will be treated poorly at best. and I still say I'll do it. Oh, nah, man.
No swearing.
That. If that means the Ravens go to war and they choose to attack us, well, we would just be defending ourselves, right? It was bound to happen sooner or later. I could justify that. But that shows you the kind of person that I am, and the kind of person that Ethan is. Does he know what the Ravenlands are like? How much does he know about Braun's personality beyond what he has experienced here? Does Ethan think that he'll be tortured? Because I would certainly think that I was going to be tortured for sure. Even without taking the sigil into account, for me, this is the moment where Ethan goes from being our lead character to our leading hero, as he sacrifices of himself in order to save the lives of others. The sigil didn't do that. Ethan's heart did. And that is a pretty cool character. I am a bit annoyed that Braun allows Skink to accompany Ethan, though. If I were him and I'd been planning on torturing this kid who just wronged me in my dungeon prison for a year, I sure wouldn't want some lesser race's witness around. Although maybe Braun was planning to torture Skink in order to punish Ethan, I could definitely see that. Then again, maybe Braun isn't planning torture at all. He has been wronged here, maybe he is just reacting poorly in the moment. It still feels like a weird decision on his part, though. One sea journey later, we aren't given a time frame, the hoverboat comes to a stop at the docks of the Raven capital. Ethan, referred to as Heron, or Boy, is summoned up from below deck. As he blinks in the muddled sun, we see a large, complicated locking mechanism over his shoulders, and it also secures his wrists.
"Step livelier than that, boy,"
one of the Raven guards orders. He then kicks Ethan down the hologram-projected ramp to the docks below. Skink, who doesn't appear to be manacled at all, which, again, really big oversight, rushes to his side. Is Ethan okay? Is he hurt? Ethan finds his knees. No, he doesn't think so. Braun, who now wears an eye patch over his scar, stands over him. Have a look at your new home, boy. White, square buildings with wooden roofs line the dock, their stone worn and sturdy. They rise up a hill, ending at a ridge which leads to a black stone fortress, the Raven Keep. A rough, rocky mountain rises behind it, leading the eye up to a darkened sky. It is a foreboding sight, but hey, it's home. Inside, a large, muscular, red-skinned member of the lesser races guides Ethan and Skink down to the lower dungeons. Skink encourages Ethan to be brave, and Ethan assures him that he won't let them see his fear. But movement catches Ethan's eye. Down a separate tunnel, a woman wearing a bright green dress with a white shawl is entering a separate route. Her red hair is a bright bundle atop her head, and she stops for a moment. A single green eye looks over her shoulder at him. And then she steps, and she's gone. Ethan is dumbstruck, stopping in place, asking who she is. A hand clamps down on his shoulder in reply, spinning him around, and then Braun slashes a knife up Ethan's face. He screams and drops to his knees, blood splashing onto the floor. Braun stands over him. I will have satisfaction. There will be no one to heal this scar either. He then orders that Ethan be thrown into his cell, and he is. The walls of the room are dirty stone. A pile of straw on the floor is the closest thing that it has to a bed. There is a single bucket that apparently houses clean water, although that also would not have been my first guess. Skink explains that the restraint should have shut off when they were locked in, and sure enough, Ethan can remove it, and he does so. Skink tears off some cloth from his shirt sleeve, dunks it in the water, and then he wipes at the wound. Ethan starts at the pain, but Skink can't help him with that. Ethan sullenly says that he probably deserves it. No, Skink says, this pain isn't because you did something wrong. It's because you did something right, Ethan. You did the honorable thing. Although, you really should rest. Gently resting a hand on Skink's own, Ethan thanks him for everything. Skink looks at Ethan, and then he focuses on Ethan. His orange eyes glow from within, and he commands Ethan to rest. Unable to resist, Ethan lays down on the straw, and his sigil begins to glow quietly. Skink sits in the dark, his head resting on his folded arms. The door to the cell opens, and light spills into the room. Skink stands, maybe readying to protect his charge. Someone in a maroon cloak stands over them both. Our closing scenes then run together. One of them begins with a close-up of Ethan, his face resting in green grass. The other is of the cell door, framing Braun as he looks into the cell. Ethan's camera pulls out, revealing him to be in a grassy patch of forest. Braun's camera pulls in, as disbelief and rage wash over his face. He shouts into the empty cell, "Where is he?" A crystal-clear river runs through the forest that surrounds Ethan and Skink. He is obviously confused and asks Skink where they are. Skink quietly tells him that everything is fine, even his face. Ethan runs a gentle hand over his wound, but there is no wound, not even a scar. But how? And how did they get here, wherever here is? Skink gestures at the cloaked figure, who stands near a pair of horses a distance away. This figure pulls off their cloak, saying that they are the one who saved him. Underneath the cloak is a beautiful young woman. Purple leather covers her legs, accented by silver armored boots and a silver belt around her waist. A red skirt slashes across her leg, leaving the left one exposed. A matching purple leather vest covers her chest. Silver gauntlets circle her wrists, although one of them is designed more like a bracelet. This is the same woman that we saw inside the Raven Keep, although in a very different outfit. Her name is Ashley. And as if things hadn't been bad enough for Ethan before, things have gotten worse. He surrendered himself in order to prevent a war, and now it sure does look like he just escaped from his punishment. Unless he turns himself back in, but we're going to explore his reaction next issue, obviously, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time playing with it here. Regarding Ethan, though, this was a really rough ending. I am sure that he wasn't expecting to have a nice, quiet stay in the Raven dungeons, but did he expect to be cut up? He takes the slash from Braun in
No swearing.
fucking stride. He cries out, but he doesn't feel any anger or outrage. There's no desire for payback here. When Braun was cut, he was furious. But when Ethan gets cut, he just accepts it. Admittedly, Ethan does comment that perhaps he deserves the pain, so at least to some degree, he thinks that this is a suitable punishment. An eye for an eye, I guess. We also see his sigil kick in when he falls asleep, so whatever it does, it appears to work unconsciously. Maybe Ethan wanted the power to defeat Braun in the tournament, and without knowing it, he used the sigil to get it? And maybe the same thing is now happening here. Maybe Ethan wants to recover and heal, and so he does. How much of the sigil's actions are directed by him, and how much of it just happens to him? We also see Skink's eyes glow when he tells Ethan to sleep, which is definitely new. There's no other effect going on here, his word balloons look like normal word balloons, there's no energy around his hand, it doesn't look like he's casting a spell. But there is certainly something going on here. We don't know what it is yet, but there is more than meets the eye to good old Skink. And then we have Ashley. I'm not going to get too much into her here, as she's going to be a big focus in our next issue, but my initial thoughts are all pretty positive. She clearly has some affiliation with the Ravens, as she was walking freely and casually in the dungeon areas, and she clearly had enough skill or pull to break Ethan out. And obviously, she broke him out, so clearly at the very least, she is on Ethan's side for this moment. She is beautiful looking as well. It is clear why she caught Ethan's eye in the dungeon, although I will forever question wearing a small leather vest as a top when you're going horseback riding or breaking a prisoner out of their cell. There's definitely some fan service going on here, although we aren't at Red Monica levels of it yet either, so thank God. She seems calm and capable, though. She is clearly smart and sneaky, which would balance well with Ethan's frank optimism if they continue to interact. Or she'll be the practical one, and he'll be the naive one, so, we'll see. Fun fact, this character was named from Mark Alessi's daughter, Ashley, which is just a little Easter egg that I love. I am a little displeased with the reveal of Ethan being gone, though. It almost feels like the creative team was trying to make us think that Braun was coming back to mess with Ethan some more. He opens the cell, and then we get the slow discovery of Ethan being gone. But cutting Braun's discovery with Ethan lying in the grass kind of blows the reveal right away. And right before that scene, we see the hooded figure enter the cell, who clearly doesn't match Braun's silhouette when we see him next standing in the door at all. If the door had swung open and then maybe we just saw a shadow standing in it or their silhouette, and then you could cut to Braun looking in with his eyes widening and then yelling, and then maybe cut to Ethan waking up, I think that would have built the suspense more successfully and made this scene work a little bit better. Otherwise, artistically, this book is my dream. Back when I had a DeviantArt account, one of the prompts their profile settings asked was, "What is your favorite art style?" And I answered pointy, because honestly, I tend to like artists who have really sharp line work. Back in the late 90s, artists like Joe Mad, Chris Bachalo, Jeff Matsuda, and Mike Ringo were all my personal faves, and all of them were artists who tended to have a pointier style of artwork. And Jim Chung is certainly no exception. His artwork is definitely a level up from the work that he did on Maverick, though. It is cleaner, it's crisp, it is highly detailed. Don Hillsman II's inks match Chung's line work well, adding weight and depth to figures that are closer to the camera, making them feel more in focus, while fading them out in the background. Chung's work here was probably the first heavy use of speed lines that I saw in backgrounds as well, a little bit of that anime and manga inspiration taking hold. The fight between Ethan and Braun in the tournament flowed really well and really kind of displayed that more anime sense of aesthetic. Cesar Rodriguez's colors are bright and lively too, a definite step up from the work that was done over Chung's line work in Maverick. That book's colors tended to be more faded or washed out, perhaps in an attempt to keep the espionage-esque feel that the book was going for. But here, this is pure heroic fantasy, filled with bright colors and gorgeous highlights. The color effect on that tournament armor is gorgeous, with strong areas of color near the line work and the outlines, but then it would fade towards the center, making it look almost like they were fighting inside of glass. The coloring on the sigil and Skink's eyes is great as well, subtly telling us that something is happening, without also dropping 1,000 exposition boxes to tell us what is happening. That is good comics, and I dig it. I love looking at this book again. If I had any complaint worth its weight, it's that these 2 issues just don't feel like enough. We are 2 issues into this saga, and it still feels like we're finding this book's feet. However, these books were intentionally built to intrigue the audience and make you want to read more, and I would argue that this book does that in spades. I like Ethan, I like the world that he is in so far, and I like that while he has this strange sigil on his arm, the problems that he's faced have all been personal. Defeating Braun was a necessity, even without the sigil. Resolving the conflict between the Ravens and the Herons was a necessity, even without the sigil. And now that he has been freed, Ethan is going to have to navigate this new problem. And it doesn't look like the sigil can help with that. The characters and the story that they are in is more important than this MacGuffin that showed up on his arm, and that is a solid basis for good storytelling. These comics are good, man! I legitimately almost reread the first 7 issues of this book in one go. Like, I had to actively stop myself in order to keep this experience as fresh as possible per episode. But it is so nice to be back, and it is so odd to not be reading everything else. If anyone listening to this episode is a CrossGen fan, first off, hello and welcome. On the CrossGen message boards, I was known as Tadoshi's Grief, so if you're a fan from back in the CrossGen days, hey, how you doing? But if you are a longtime fan, and you are used to CrossGen, then you know some things about the CrossGen universe that Scion hasn't told us yet. And you might be personally upset that I didn't include CrossGen Chronicles Issue 1 in this breakdown. For the uninitiated, there is a small scene in that issue that takes place between issues 1 and 2 of Scion. However, 95% of CrossGen Chronicles issue 1 deals with other matters, and it doesn't further Scion's narrative at all. Since I'm introducing you all to a brand new comic universe with brand new characters and concepts, I figured that I shouldn't throw the entire kitchen at you. The story in that issue basically has Skink comfort Ethan after the fight with Brawn, and it ends with Brawn grabbing for Ethan, which is where we picked up in issue 2, so other than some very minor character work, we didn't miss anything. The point of that issue was to act as a sampler for CrossGen's line of titles, showing short scenes that tied into each one of CrossGen's launch books. And while it certainly does that, it doesn't affect those books at all, so I chose to leave it out. It would also kind of suck to interrupt the flow of Ethan's story by suddenly throwing in everything that issue contains, so yeah, we are staying sleek and focused on this one, and I chose to leave that issue out. Next time, Ethan learns why Ashley broke him out of the dungeons, and he gets his first look into a much broader conflict than his family's squabble. And while he might be out of the dungeon, he is still behind enemy lines, and being hunted by the bounty hunter Exeter. Join me in a week for Comic Book Breakdown episode 18.2 of Scion, The Underground. Everyone, there are a million podcasts vying for your time and attention, and I'd like to thank you for listening to mine. If you would like to get in touch with me to share a concern, request a series, compliment me, berate me, whatever you like, send me an email at cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Otherwise, thanks for listening.